You're listening to Pelle Tenebris Radio, part of Fight the Lies Radio on the Cast 'em Off Ministries Network. Good afternoon. Welcome to Pelle Tenebris Podcast. My name is Kelly, and as always, it's a pleasure to have you here with me today. You're probably going to get sick of hearing me say that, but too bad, it is absolutely true. Today, I don't really have so much of a topic as a little bit of a message for those of you who are listening and have chronic illnesses. I'm going to touch just a little bit on a subject that has rubbed me and several others the wrong way, and that is part of the Word of Faith movement and the idea that because you're chronically ill, you must have sinned somewhere in your life, and if you repent of that sin and turn away from it, then bam, you're going to be healed. Now, you're going to hear time and time again of my experiences in our old congregation and how these experiences have affected me. Now, I relate these to you, especially in regards to certain topics, because I want you to know that you're not alone if you are experiencing these things, and it's very difficult to find others who are empathetic and sympathetic towards your sufferings, and that's pretty much how it is when we're chronically ill. We do suffer, and we've become so good at putting on a mask of not being sick that it can be difficult for many people to take us seriously. And every experience that I do relate is going to be matching up to the topic that I'm talking about. And so if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you know I have a few chronic pain conditions. I've had migraines since I was 6. I've had endometriosis since I was 13 years old. I was diagnosed with interstitial cystitis last year. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with chronic active Epstein-Barr virus. And in case you didn't know about that, the Epstein-Barr virus is the virus that causes mono. Once that virus is in your system, it stays in there. It may never activate and you never get mono. It may activate one time and you have mono that one time. But in people like myself and a few others, it activates and then it deactivates and then it reactivates and then it deactivates and on and on and on. And it is thought that chronic active Epstein-Barr virus also causes chronic fatigue syndrome, and both of these do cause me and others to get sick very, very easily, and we experience fatigue that it's really hard to put into words. A lot of people would say, when you have chronic active Epstein-Barr virus, to exercise, and that's going to help with the fatigue, but some days the fatigue is just so bad, it is really difficult to get up and even take a 5-minute walk. So I don't know how long I've had, chronic active Epstein-Barr. I suspect that it's been around since 2003, since I was first diagnosed with mono. And then I was diagnosed again in 2009 and then 2012. And the last time in 2012, it went on for about 2.5 years until it seemed that the virus deactivated. But lately I have noticed that the fatigue has really been creeping in again, and so it's been kind of difficult to keep myself active and moving around, and I'm going to have to credit my Boston Terrier, Kayla, with helping me get out and exercise because she loves going on walkies, so I try to make sure that I take her out at least once a day and go for a couple of rounds, get both of us some good exercise and some more bonding time. So if you're in a church where it's insinuated that you're chronically ill because of sin, you are definitely not alone. This topic, it's a matter of some controversy because it's not 100% accurate to say that all illnesses are caused by sin, and it's not 100% accurate to say that all illnesses are not caused by sin. People who don't know you personally, they don't have any right to accuse you of sinning and bringing an illness upon yourself. They don't know your background. You may have a genetic predisposition to chronic migraine or fibromyalgia or diabetes, and maybe you take really good care of yourself, but one day this illness just decides to pop up in your life and you don't have anything. And so it's really difficult to be in a church or a Messianic congregation and hear people say that you've sinned, and that's the reason that you're sick. But whatever chronic issue you do suffer, it's really no one's place to be accusatory or to put you down. We all do make mistakes that can and do have an adverse effect on our health, but that doesn't mean everyone who is chronically ill does. Included with these people are the ones who are going to also tell you to hush when you say, I think I'm getting sick. And now this goes back to the Word of Faith movement, and I covered that in episode 2 of my podcast. But it goes back to the Word of Faith movement, where they believe that we have the power to speak faith or fear into our lives, and saying, I think I'm getting sick, is among the fear part. The belief that we can speak positive or negative things into existence is, to me, a ridiculous idea. And it's absolutely ludicrous to think that such a statement as, I think I'm getting sick, brings illness upon the speaker. Let's say you wake up and you've got a scratchy throat, it's itching and it's a little bit sore, and you say, my throat feels a little bit sore. They believe that even saying that is bringing an illness upon yourself. It's inviting it in. And the fact is that we're in a fallen world where there is sickness and there is disease, and none of us are completely immune to it. And I want to go ahead and give you a little bit of an example. 6 years ago, this was a few months before my husband and I left our congregation, I caught some kind of bug. I guess it was the flu after having foot surgery. Now, my husband had caught this in the waiting room when he recovered. I ended up catching the bug, and I ended up getting an ear infection. I had noticed one night that my ears were really itchy and are driving me crazy. And I woke up the next morning, my ears were clogged up, I couldn't hear very well, my ears were hurting pretty bad, and I told my husband, I said, I think I'm getting an ear infection. He responded with, don't say that, don't speak that into existence. But you have to understand that the both of us, for a short time, we believed this Word of Faith crud. And so I responded to him with, I'm not speaking it into existence. I've been feeling this since it started last night. But me still being under the impression that if I ignored the symptoms and didn't say anything more, the infection would just disappear, I didn't bother seeing a doctor. So the next day, or maybe a couple of days later, the ear infection became so bad that I was really out of it. I was in so much pain from this ear infection, and it was in both of my ears, that I barely had any idea of what was going on. And the 2010 Winter Olympics were going on, and figure skating was up, and it was my favorite thing, and I can't even remember anything about that. So my husband and my mother-in-law nagged at me until I finally got up. They took me to an emergency room. I was put on an IV with antibiotics and started feeling better. And so the doctor prescribed a course of antibiotics that would clear up the rest of the infection. And unfortunately, after having surgery, your immune system's, it's kind of down a little bit and you're recovering. And we ended up getting strep throat to the both of us. That was terrible. So I think I was sick for about 5 weeks, and that was terrible. But in the time that I was in this congregation and in the Word of Faith podcast that I did, I barely touched upon this, and so I'm going to expound on it a little bit. I said in that episode that I kept hearing from people, God is healing your womb. That womb had to be removed last year because of benign tumors that kept coming back, and these tumors, along with endometriosis, contributed to my infertility. And being pushed to start a family with my husband, not being able to conceive, people started insinuating that it was because I didn't have enough faith. Kelly, if you just have enough faith, everything's going to get better. You're going to conceive. Well, that's not true. It was really rough to go through because there were a lot of women in this congregation in my age group and just a little bit younger who were married and were having children. They were getting pregnant, and I'm just like, well, why them and not me? So it was really difficult to go through this and to hear in somebody's voice the thought that they don't think I had enough faith. I really didn't appreciate it. I knew I had faith. I knew that if God meant me to have children, it would happen. But I was just as content with not having children or either having one. Either way, it didn't really matter to me. And it wasn't until my husband and I were really pushed to start a family that I started feeling that really strong desire to conceive, because I thought I was supposed to do that. We're a married couple. We're supposed to have children. That's what you do. If you're a single person, then you're supposed to get married. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, Paul said that not everyone is meant for that. Some people are meant to have a single life. And, that's perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that they're broken. It just means that they don't want to get married. That's that. So just leave them alone. So last year, there was almost 2 months in between my laparoscopic surgery for endometriosis, my third one, and the hysterectomy, I gave myself over to grieving and weeping over this lost hope, because I had still held out just a little bit of hope that maybe I could have one child, and I would have been satisfied with that. But to lose this hope, it's intimidating. It's scary to know that you're going to lose an important part of yourself, an important part of your body, a part that is meant to house and to nurture and to protect life. And it's terrible enough to know that you're incapable of creating that life, but to know that that womb is going to be gone for good, and that all hope, even the smallest amount of hope that you held out, is gone. This is a pretty big thing to face. And I had talked to a couple of friends about it, and I was telling them how I felt, and that it was just so upsetting to me. And, that's what friends are for. They're there to listen to you and be with you through times like this. But I kept hearing, there's always adoption, or you could use a surrogate. And that's not what I needed to hear. I needed somebody who could empathize with me. And nothing against these friends. They are very dear to me. But I kept thinking, this is easy for you to say because you have children. And I don't. You don't know what it's like to have this hope and to lose it, to be faced with it. And all around you, people are telling you, well, there's always adoption. When someone is faced with a surgery like a hysterectomy, which is a pretty big deal, and there's definitely risk involved in this, especially great loss of blood, it's frightening for us to deal with this. And we go through this feeling that we're no longer a woman because we're losing this vital part of ourselves. And especially if you're childless, I want to tell you, you're not alone. And I understand that pain that we all go through in this, and that uncertainty as well. And all of this just built up inside me. And so I thought, there's someone who knows what I'm going through. And so I turned to God and I talked to him. And I let out my grief. I let out my anger, not at him, but at my own body for turning against me, and for producing this disease for which there is no cure, for which there is so much chronic pain that women have committed suicide because they can't deal with it. Because doctors and nurses and female gynecologists, male gynecologists look at women who have endometriosis, and we are dismissed as drug seekers, and all we want is for that pain to stop. Because when you have to go every day of your life living in pain with a few days in a year maybe where you feel fine, it's hard. You just want it to end. So I was so angry with my body for having turned against me. And I just cried out to God, and I cried and I cried and I cried. And in all of this, there was this fear. Every time I thought about the upcoming surgery, I would just get this surge of fear because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to turn out okay. I did not know what to expect. So I went through it, and for a few months after, I felt that loss. I felt that loss of this very vital organ, and it was all I could do to read and study the Word and just talk to God in order to keep myself from falling into this feeling of I'm not really a woman anymore. Because in some places, in some churches, in some Messianic congregations, it's insinuated that you're not really a woman because you cannot have children. And that's a complete and total lie. So if that's been insinuated to you, don't believe it. It is not your fault that you haven't been able to create it. So after those few months, I started healing emotionally as well as physically. The full time to heal from this surgery, before I was able to really get up and around and moving and back to doing what I usually do, was 4 weeks. But in reality, it's about 6 months for complete and total healing of the body. And, I got through it. and there was blood loss, but thank the Lord it was not enough to warrant a transfusion, so I wasn't in danger of losing my life. And I know now that surgery really was for the best, because these tumors, if they're allowed to grow, they can twist on their stalks. They can cause greater pain. And, sometimes with things like this, maybe there's an infection or something that can happen. So it was for the best that I'd had the hysterectomy. And the unfortunate thing is there are some doctors who say, if you have this tumor in your uterus, they're called fibroids, then you can just have what's known as a myomectomy and get rid of it and you're fine. But the thing is, these grow back. And the large one that had showed up on the ultrasound and that the doctor had seen in doing the surgery for my endometriosis, it was not the only one. There were more covering my uterus. And so, in all honesty, it is a great relief to be free from the pain caused by all that. And, wow, that was really emotional. I'm sorry. I hope you're not crying. I hope I didn't make you cry. It's, again, it's really all for the best, and I knew that. But when you have these things going on, it's okay to talk to God, and it's okay to be angry, as long as you're not angry at Him and blaming Him. Just don't do anything out of that anger or that is fueled by that anger, because that's where sin can come in and get a foothold. So if you have a chronic pain condition, it's important to talk to your family and friends and educate them, because those of us with chronic illness, man, we researched and researched and researched our illnesses and our, I don't want to say diseases, but our conditions. And so sometimes we almost know more than the doctors know. I know what's good for me and what's not good for me in regards to having migraines. I'm honestly very wary of taking preventive medication because I have a history of depression, and this is a battle I'm going to fight my entire life. But there was a medication that I took called Topamax, and that was taken to try to prevent these chronic migraines. And what happened is that it made my depression so bad, I was very seriously considering suicide. So I had to call my neurologist and tell her this is affecting me very badly. And I was taken off of that drug. And along with that side effect, I was really lethargic and just sleepy, and I didn't like it. So what I've done is, and this goes for all of us with chronic illness and chronic pain conditions, we have to find out what works best for us. And there's the eternal search for a doctor who is not going to load you up with pharmaceuticals, who is going to work with you and understand what you're going through, and somebody who is not going to put you down, but is going to help you in doing what is best for you and what is best for your body. And so it may take years to do this, but all of us have such a fighting spirit. And we also have days where we just want to lie down and give up and say, I can't take it anymore. And this is where our families and our friends, the people we love and care about, come in. If you're listening to this and you have someone in your life who is chronically ill, I would encourage you to look up and research their illness and have a frank, honest, and open talk with this loved one. Ask them how you can best support them. Because saying you don't look sick, or trying to shrug off or brush off their symptoms, or saying, but you were so active yesterday, what happened? This happens. For all of you listening, chronic illness, we do have good days. And these are the days that we cherish and the days that we take advantage of, because we know that the next day we're going to get back to feeling like crap. And so we need you as our loved ones to understand us and to support us, to have compassion on us, to go to our doctor visits with us, so you can learn more and understand more about what we have going on in our lives. And for the people in the church who may think that because you have a chronic illness that it's because of sin, I think the best way of dealing with this is to look at them and ask them, what basis do you have in saying that? And to find scripture that relates to this. Because when we think about the time that Jesus met the blind man, And his disciples asked him, Lord, who sinned and caused this man to be blind, him or his parents? And the man had been blind since birth, and so normally you would assume that it was his parents who had sinned. And Jesus replied and said, neither this man nor his parents have sinned, but this has been done so that God can get the glory. Now, we may never, ever be healed of our chronic illnesses and our chronic pain conditions. This may be a thorn in our sides, like Paul had. But what these teach us is, number one, that we cannot rely on our strength alone, but on the strength that also comes from the Lord. It teaches us that we can gain greater capacity for understanding others, for compassion, for love, for empathy, and it just grows with every issue that we face, with everything that we try, with all the research that we do. And there will come days where we get so sick and tired of being around people, and we get so sick and tired of the constant comments. You don't look sick. You're too young to be sick. You looked fine yesterday. You acted fine yesterday. It can't be that bad. Well, at least it's not cancer. Man, don't say that. Don't say any of those things to somebody with a chronic condition, because it's hard enough to live our lives knowing that we may never get better and having to content ourselves with that knowledge and come to understand it. And that's through a lot of anger and a lot of pain and a lot of tears, but eventually we come to this understanding and we know it. And I want to go back to where I was talking about going to a doctor that's not going to load you up with pharmaceuticals. I'm not trying to say that medications are bad. In fact, I believe that medications can and are used to help relieve symptoms. And look at what's being done, with cancer research. These medications, these treatments are helping to kill cancer cells so that people can live their lives more fully and more beautifully. So I'm not trying to say that medication is bad at all. So please don't take it that way. What I'm saying is that a doctor who can recommend other methods alongside taking your medications, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I mean, because I have to take a medication for my interstitial cystitis that numbs my bladder, and I need to take this 3 times a day. And alongside that, I'm taking aloe pills to try to see if that aloe will make a false coating around the inside of my bladder so that it relieves pain. And alongside that, I have exercises and stretches that I do to relieve the tenseness that's in my pelvic floor muscles. So again, I'm not trying to say that relying on medications is a bad thing. If it works for you, then it works for you. What I was really talking about is, a doctor that just continually gives us one medication after another to try. It can get very tiring and very discouraging, but it's all part of the search to find what works for us and what will help us better deal with these chronic illnesses and chronic pain conditions. And I'm going to include in this people who don't have a chronic physical illness, but people who have a mental illness. I have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder and general anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder. And you wouldn't know that to hear me talk. Along with these, I am very much the introvert. I very much value quiet and alone time. When I was a child, because of my mother's passion for perfection, let's say, and because of the words that she said to me, she was emotionally and verbally and mentally abusive, and sometimes physically abusive. And this is where all this anxiety and depression comes from. And so I have been going to see a therapist for a few years, and he's been helping me to face these fears, to face these anxieties and these panic attacks when they do come, to even embrace the panic attack. And I know that sounds really odd, but honestly, it has worked for me. And part of this therapy it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it was very frightening to go through at first, and I didn't want to do it, but I started with the exercises. I got this great book called The Happiness Trap, and I would highly recommend that you at least check it out and read it, because it's got so many good points in it and good exercises in it. And I found that through this therapy, I have been better able to face my anxiety and face my depression. But that's not to say it works all the time. I have days where I slip up. But for those of us who do have mental illness, I want to include you in on this because I know it's very, very difficult because there is still such a stigma that is around mental illness, and the way that the mentally ill are portrayed in movies is not fair. It's not just, and it makes us look like we're really just worthy of being committed into a mental institution. And that isn't fair because we fight an inner battle every day, and that battle takes place in our minds. And in the Word of Faith movement, again, they think that you can overcome depression and anxiety. There are folks who absolutely have, and they don't have that anymore. But for the rest of us who have to deal with this, and we know that we're going to have to deal with this for the rest of our lives, it's not right to push us and to tell us and to quote that scripture over and over again at us. Perfect love knows no fear. And for God has not given me a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and self-control. And I hated having that quoted at me anytime I was anxious. Oh, it drove me crazy. I didn't want somebody to enable me, but what I wanted was for somebody to look at me and say, it's okay to be afraid. This is normal. There's nothing wrong with you. Just don't give in to that fear. And that's what happens with me. That's what happens with a lot of us with anxiety and with depression. We sink into it, and it's really difficult to get out of that pit. But we have our good days too. And if you have to take medication every day, there's nothing wrong with that, and there is nothing wrong with you. If it works for you, do it. If you're like me and you don't want to take those medications, because for me, I don't do it because I know I'm Little Miss, experience all the side effects, so I try to stay away as much as possible. But if you found that therapy, like acceptance and commitment therapy, has worked for you, that's great. The important thing here is that our bodies are temples, and we need to do what we can to take care of them, to not push them to the limit, to not push them too far, to not force us and force our bodies to do things that can actually harm us. But what we really need to do is to seek the Lord's guidance and seek His help and His word in getting treatments and getting help with this. And what we need to do is to reach out to those who don't understand about our illnesses. We need to reach out to them in love, because looking at it from their perspective, they don't understand and they don't know what to do. And so what we can do is help them, and we can help them help us. And that's really greatly, vastly important in this. So the point of all this over 30 minutes of talking, probably less after editing, is that if you're a Christian and you have chronic pain condition, if you have chronic physical illness, if you have mental illness, you are not a broken person who needs to be fixed and made as new by others. And it is not fair of them, it is not fair of our brothers and sisters in Christ to imply that it's because of sin, because they don't know your life personally. And again, it's not 100% accurate to say it's not caused by sin. It's not 100% accurate to say that it is caused by sin. So this is controversial. I am getting my research together. I'm getting notes together because I'm going to cover this topic more fully in another podcast, as well as covering, addictions and how that is harmful, not to just our bodies, but our minds and our spirits. But I wanted to record this special podcast for you because I know there are so many who need to hear this, who need to feel loved and that their illnesses are validated, because all of it is absolutely real. And for the people who tell you that you need to continue to pray and do this and do that and do the other thing in order to have enough faith and so that you can be healed and all this, don't pay them any attention. What you need to do is to take this to the Lord, to seek His word, to seek His voice, to seek His guidance, and you need to surround yourself with good, godly people who have good, strong doctrine that is not heretical. You need to surround yourself with them for encouragement and for help, and really put this to prayer, put this to the Lord, take it to Him every day if you need to, and we all do need to, but pray for guidance, pray for strength to get through this time. And when you're having a bad flare up, when you're having a bad bout of depression or anxiety, pray that the Lord would give you strength and would show you the way to help yourself, take care of yourself, so that you can live a good life and live one for the Lord and be able to minister to others. Because, we're broken. We're all broken. That's the beauty of all this. We've been spiritually broken, and the Lord has just glued us back together and has used our testimonies and our experiences so that we can reach out to others who are going through the same things that we went through. So I really hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope it gave you encouragement, and I want to let you know that if you have no one to talk to and you need to speak to someone who can understand what you're going through in regards to physical or mental illness, I invite you to email me at pellettenebrisradio@gmail.com. It is spelled PELLETENEBRIS radio@gmail.com. Don't hesitate to contact me. I will be here for you. I will be glad to help you in any way that I can. I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful day, and until next time. Pelle Tenebris Radio is a production of Fight the Lies Ministries. Visit us at ftlradio.net. This program is released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com.